everybody, and welcome to Good Stuff. As always, it's great to have you. Appreciate the support here on all the platforms right now. Just a reminder, when you get a chance to head on over to Good Stuff with Kevin on YouTube and subscribe and follow us anywhere on Twitter and LinkedIn, my personal pages, and Good Stuff on Facebook. Looking forward to our guest today, an old-time colleague, and it's been nice to catch up, and I know you're going to get a great deal out of this episode, but he's the head coach of Indiana Wesleyan University, Greg Tonagel. Greg, it's great to have you, man.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's good to catch up.
Yeah, well, the only thing I didn't like reminiscing about is when you beat us over there at Indiana Wesleyan, but you've done that a ton to everybody. But hey, let's dive in right away, Greg, with your playing career. Obviously, a great player in high school, and then going to Valparaiso. For those of you that maybe remember the Bryce Drew shot in the tournament, I remember that growing up, and you went there your freshman year. Man, you had a really good first year, and then adversity kind of struck. So kind of briefly talk to us a little bit about your career there, and then kind of what got you into coaching, and we'll go right into Indiana Wesleyan from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to think about where I'm at now without really reflecting upon those difficult times. And for me, that was an injury. I often say this to our guys, that in the moment, we wouldn't choose adversity, but in the aftermath, we wouldn't trade it. So now I'm looking back, I don't know, 20 years later, I wouldn't trade 4 knee surgeries, sitting on that bench, watching the game from a completely unique perspective, because it shaped and formed me as a coach. And, at the time I go into college, all I was thinking about was, who do we play next? But I think God was kind of preparing me for the next 30, 40 years of my life as a coach. I wasn't interested in coaching at that time. I just wanted to play. But then I got injured. I sat out. I saw the game from a completely different perspective, had different relationships on my team, and began to think, man, maybe coaching is something I want to do. And those years were hard. I mean, we've all had players go through injury, but to be injured for basically 4 years, to miss almost the entirety of your career because you're injured, that's difficult. But now I understand that it shaped me as a coach and positioned me to then go in an area maybe I wouldn't have gone before. And I love what I'm doing. As you know, talked to a lot of coaches. We're blessed to be able to do this. It's hard to call this a job. It's hard work, but it is a lot of fun. I don't ever feel like I'm going to work. I feel like I'm going to do what I love.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think failure is just something that's played such a big part of my life. And I can think of a lot of setbacks probably that I had yesterday. Now you're not failing as much as a coach, obviously, but I think that's a great perspective that you bring to us. So it's obviously fit in the grand scheme of things for you, right? I mean, adversity in general and then failure. I got to think it's something that you just kind of embrace and not look forward to necessarily, but you look at it from a different angle or perspective. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a while to really figure that out. I mean, I think the way I look at failure now is completely different. I think I'm constructed to have a little bit more of a fixed mindset, meaning I want to avoid failure because I don't want to be exposed. I don't want you to see my weaknesses. But the older I get, the more experience I get, the more I realize, don't waste a failure. Use it as an opportunity. Certainly don't try to circumvent it, because those are the times that we grow. And my teams, like my greatest runs, the teams that have won these national championships have been born out of failure. It's those losing streaks. And when you're in a losing streak as a coach, we all know it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, are we ever going to win another game?
Yeah,
right. We went on a 3-game losing streak in 2016 when we won our second national championship. And I remember just saying to my staff, we're not going to win another game this year.
Yeah.
But that drove us deeper. That made us form some deeper connections. That made us care about the details. So once again, we never choose those, but in the aftermath, we would never trade those.
I don't know about you, but I just remember being involved in losing streaks, and I felt like I was on an island. Like I felt my assistant coaches were on a different island, and the players were even on a different island. There's a lot of business leaders and coaches that listen to this, Greg. Like, what are some things that you would encourage people to do when they're going through that? Because I think it's going to exist at some point, and it might exist for some more than others. So are there certain things that you could, continue to encourage those people with when they're going through failure or adversity?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, because there's this strange paradox in leadership. Like, everybody wants to climb to the top, but it's also one of the most loneliest places to be, especially when things aren't going well. And I see that in coaching all the time. And I've been fortunate enough to really surround myself with great people. Like my staff, my assistant coaches, they're my best friends. Doesn't mean we don't argue, doesn't mean we don't, get in the
Right.
trenches together. But to have people that you trust and you care and you truly love in those moments eliminates some of that loneliness, because the higher we go, the more separation we have with people. But I guess a lot of that depends on how you view leadership. I feel like we're called to go lower, because the lower we go, which actually means we're serving more people, that we're on the ground with people. We're not in those moments, we're not separated from them. So for me, what it's been is just deep relationships with my staff. And I think we hurt together in those times, but it's better to hurt together than it is to feel like you're
Yeah.
completely lonely and you got nowhere to turn.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I think you nailed it. Why is it that I don't know if it's just me being biased to the sports world, of course, but when I step outside of that, sometimes I feel as if some people, especially leaders, are not able to have those type of conversations that you just referred to. I mean, confrontation is a word that scares a lot of people, right? But how can that be healthy for a business, an organization, and a team, and for people not to take that personal?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if it's our perception of strength. So we're often told, as a leader, man, you really have to project strength to your people. And the
Hmm.
way we understand strength, unfortunately, it's a domineering form of strength. It's coercion. It's, man, I have to stand above my team and I have to control them. When in reality, what if strength is actually viewed as weakness? Meaning, when I'm vulnerable, when I'm authentic, what happens if that power is actually transferred to the people around me? But that's hard, because that means I'm exposing myself. Once again, we go back to that idea of weakness and failure. I'm showing you who I really am. I'm showing you that I'm weak. But I think there's times, and especially in coaching, where what my team needs from me is not strength, but they need weakness. They need me to walk in front of them and say, fellas, I don't have the answers right now. I mean, we're experiencing that right now.
Yeah, it's so
Talking
true.
about, the racial tensions in our country. I'm not walking in front of my team saying, guys, I have the answers. What I'm
Hmm.
saying is, I'm weak, I'm broken, I'm potentially part of the problem. Can you guys help me? And we've seen our team grow because of that mindset. And I've grown personally to understand things from somebody else's perspective much better in this moment. And so, once again, man, I just think we've got to fight that urge to say, because I'm the leader, I'm going to show you how strong I am. Rather, I'm going to show you how weak I am right now. And I'm going to grow with you during this moment.
Yeah, that's powerful, Greg. I mean, I think that is so good for people to hear, and I think that shows why you're such a great leader. I think that vulnerability, just being authentic, and like you talked about earlier, just serving people. It seems so counterintuitive, right? I mean, and so how do you avoid, whether it is that urge for that, the opposite of that, or maybe anything that you fall in with the comparison trap, or how does that, I'm sure you have your moments like you just mentioned, but how do you avoid some of those things?
Well, the only way I know how is living in Scripture. For me, as a
Hmm.
man of faith, it's fixing my eyes upon Jesus every day, and He's the model of that. One
Yep.
of our program verses is Philippians 2:1-11, and it's an interesting description of what leadership is. Here we have Jesus, and it talks about he's been given all power, all authority, but what he does with that is he empties himself for the benefit of other people, and it's a model of pouring out that power and that privilege, if you will, that he has been given for the benefit of other people. And so I'm trying to apply that daily in my role as a leader, often failing. But I think it's not about being perfect in that role, but it's about, am I striving every day to submit myself so that other people can rise up and other people can benefit?
Yeah, I love it. And I haven't been over to Indiana Wesleyan for a while. I know we've got a lot of people around here that go to school there and just continue to follow your path. But I have to think that's I know that's the program's philosophy, but I know that's very similar to what the campus is all about and the culture. So, what makes Indiana Wesleyan so special? You've been there now 15 years, but not just a basketball program, but just the university.
Yeah, I think it's a special place because of that perspective. We would say it's an I am third culture: God first, others second, myself third, which is completely counter intuitive, and very countercultural. Like our culture tells you, look, if you want to be successful, you got to put yourself first. You have to look out for number one. You have to look out for yourself, self-preserve. We've been taught in our culture that an autonomous individual is an individual that's going to make it, that's going to make a name for himself. The problem is, if all of us look inward, not only does nothing good happen and we don't benefit those around us, but I think we leave a little bit more empty each and every time. But when we flip the script and we begin to orient our lives in a way that we posture ourselves with God first and other people second, I think what we begin to see is teams begin to form with a greater purpose in mind. Communities begin to heal. We begin to look out for the interest of others rather than what we're seeing right now is fighting, arguing, yelling. It's, he who yells loudest gets his point across. But the problem is nobody's learning from that. And so we're trying to humbly acknowledge our own faults, but also at the same time say, what if we, instead of putting ourselves first, put God first and other people second?
Well, sidetrack it. You just exposed me at home because I'm yelling at this new puppet we have almost every day. So that's why I'm not getting anywhere. But I think you go to those two commandments that we should all follow, right? It's love God and it's love others. And so I love that concept because I was literally going right into that. And I love you had a senior here, Trevor Harrell. I love what he said on one of your recent podcasts. He said, we don't just praise God where things are going well. We also give thanks in bad times. I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah, to be taught by one of your players, like I heard that too, and I needed that. And exactly. That to me, that's one of the more gratifying aspects of our job is our players are teaching us, ministering to us. We're creating spaces for that. Once again, this is not hey, I'm your coach, you're going to listen and learn from me. It's we're going to learn together. We're going to journey together. Yes, I am been given authority and in this position, and I hopefully going to provide some sort of leadership. But at the same time, I'm acknowledging there's so many things you can teach me. And there's so many things I want to learn from you. And so let's journey together. And that's what each season becomes for any coach. It becomes a journey. And if we define it by the destination, then what happens when COVID comes and ruins that destination, right? I mean,
true. Yeah.
We found that out this year. We're number one in the country. We're rolling. We get a number one seed. We get to the end of the year. Tournament's canceled 3 hours before our season or before the national tournament started. And if we only define it by the destination, then we're left saying, what a waste. 2019, 2020 was a waste. But to be able to look back and say, hey, where did we grow? Where were we challenged? Where do we go from here? We find some redemptive value in that journey. And we recognize here's how I was changed during that season. And that's what I look forward to. So as I look this year, there's a lot of unknowns. But the one known is I feel like there's going to be some opportunities for growth and change. And that excites me.
Yeah, that's great. Now I'm going to circle back to the journey. But one thing you said in there, learning from your players, that's you, getting down. I think I now realize that my title when I became head coach, that was good for about 90 seconds, right? And then as soon as but I think you mentioned something really key that I hope people listen to there is, you put yourself on that level that you talked about a little bit earlier, and to have the open mindset that those kids are teaching you as well is awesome. Now the journey, how do people appreciate that journey more? How do you not get wrapped up in the destination? Because in your world, it's that left-hand column, wins. In the business world, it's bottom line. And this goes back to what we talked about a little earlier in being counterintuitive, but what are some ways that you appreciate the journey more and that you're kind of engulfed to that rather than, what else can get in the way, if you will?
Yeah. And that's not an easy one because I'll be the first to admit, I could be really feeling great about the journey, and a few losses, all of a sudden I have to really begin to pay attention to where are my frustrations coming from? Are they with the people that I'm leading? Are they with the circumstances that I'm involved in? And it doesn't mean that at the time there's leaders, I have to accept mediocrity. Like I was telling my team the other day, nothing bothers me more than mediocrity. And I'm talking about effort. So I'm constantly challenging our guy. We're going to give our best effort. And at the end of the day, that's what we can control. We can't control whether we win or lose every single game. But as a Christian, it really comes down to the pursuit of my desires. So we call it, we have a podcast, we call it The Pursuit. Because when we think about it as coaches, we're all pursuing something. Sometimes we subconsciously pursue things. I may say, hey, I'm in it for the kids. But the reality is I'm in it for wins because everybody asks me every year, what was your record? They don't
Yeah,
ask
right.
how many kids I impacted. You know,
Yeah,
even on our campus, good intentioned people. The day after a game, they don't ask me, how did you
yeah.
help your team or how did you
Right,
win?
right.
They go, did you win last night? You know, and I don't blame them. But if I listen to that over and over, I begin to think, well, I am this record. You know, I am
Mm-hmm.
this accomplishment. That's who I am. That's my identity. And if I'm living towards that identity, then my desires begin to are shaped by that. And so it's reorienting myself constantly to pursue God first and other people second. And I am third is a catchy slogan and it's a great reminder for me, but it's really a way of living. It's a way
Yeah,
of
right.
posturing myself. Am I living towards God and am I living towards other people? And as I do that with other men, because I need other men to help me along that journey,
Mm-hmm.
coaching becomes one of the most enjoyable professions I think that there is out there.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, you have control over that, which I know I'm big on in my life, the things I control versus the things that I don't. I'd be interested, you brought up a word that gets me going a little bit too. It's mediocrity, because I just don't, I think of that Nick Saban quote that, high achievers don't like hanging out with mediocre people and mediocre people don't like hanging out with high achievers. What do you do in a business or if you've got a team when you don't, you're a leader and you don't like how this employee goes about things. You're a coach and you don't, and I know you brought him in, so there's a good chance that that doesn't exist as much. You might have some more control over that of who you want into your program. But we hire people sometimes that we had control over and thought we hired maybe the right person.
Yeah.
What do you do then as a leader when you're in that situation, whether it's high level, mediocre, like this employee, don't like this, because we all might fall into that, man, this is my favorite, not so much. How do you speak to that?
Well, I think in leadership, and the same thing in parenting, I find myself all the time. It's easier to tell people what to do and not to do rather than to tell them who they are. And there's so much power. They tell us this in psychology. I mean, research after research talks about you can prophetically tell people who they are and they're going to live into that or live down to that. Right? So if I tell a kid all the time he's stupid, well, guess what he actually does in my classroom? He does stupid things.
Starts to believe it.
Yeah, if I see potential in somebody and I spend time to actually get to know that person and I'm praying for that person, I feel like we can begin to see how that person's been gifted, how that person's been wired. And then I begin to paint a picture for that person. And the picture that I like to paint for my players is way out in front of them because people have done that for me in my life. There were people that stepped in at times and said, I see this in you. And it was so far beyond what I could see at the time, but they were right. And I needed them to see for me what I could not see. And so I think in leadership, it's easy to say, hey, here's what you're doing or not doing. We put people in a box. We call it the box versus the line. And we construct these boxes. Well, the problem with the box is it creates four walls that lock people in to your own expectation. Whereas instead of a box, what if we put them on a line? And the line was pointed up and to the right, so it's a trajectory. And we just said, here's who you are becoming. As you work hard, as you buy in, as you become passionate about the ways in which you're gifted and the way your personality, the way God has made you, you can become, this, and it's way out there. And then we help them move across that line. What I've seen is people will reach their potential far greater, far quicker, and it'll be far more enjoyable than just putting them in a simple box.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I want to transition here a little bit to your coaching career. I know you're going to deflect and be humble about all this, but at the end of the day, I mean, the list is endless here, the accomplishments. I mean, 3 national championships, 14, 16, and 18 years, 3 and 5 years. 31 national tournament wins, which is the most ever, 12 appearances, which is the most, 79% winning percentage. That's better than a lot of people's free throw shooting. That's the one thing I found out we have in common, Greg. We both shot free throws well when I was looking some things up with you.
The only thing I could do.
Yeah, over 400 wins. Like, what do you were a really good player. Success has followed you. I know adversity is a part of it. I know failure is a part of it, but you can't avoid the fact that you've been really successful. You've got great people around you. I get that. But like, what do you attribute that success to? Is there something? Is there one thing? Is there multiple things that, if I had to get to the core of it with you, Greg, what would it be?
Man, that's a good question. And I think one thing I'm learning. So our program really wants to grow in humility. And for a long time, I thought humility meant I shy away from my weaknesses. I don't acknowledge the gifts I have or the successes I've had. And you've heard the saying about humility that it's not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less.
Mm-hmm.
So I've recognized this program's been blessed, and we've been put on a pedestal, and we've been given a lot of things. We've been blessed with great talent. I've been blessed to have incredible assistants, great administration, and all that's come together. But being humble means I take that, now I leverage that for somebody else. And so I feel like I'm in a phase of coaching now. So I've just completed my 15th year at Indiana Wesleyan, where I just want to take what I have and I want to help other people with that. And so what that could be coaches, that could be kids, that could be leaders, but just taking what you have and then saying, let's move into this area. So we've connected with business leaders now that are passionate about leadership. We've connected with coaches all across the state and even the country. So I don't want to shy away from those numbers, but I also don't want to say, hey, look, I'm the result, or
Right.
I'm the reason for those numbers, because I realize they could go very quickly. And there's so many factors that have to play into those things. And we feel very thankful for them.
So is that one of the reasons, like, and don't take this the wrong way for you or anybody that's listening. I mean, I think I understand, and a lot of people understand, hey, here's how you get successful, right? But the more impressive thing is sustaining that. It's very impressive to see the Patriots, the Spurs, Indiana Wesleyan sustain that. So is that what you attribute it to? Or is there something else when it comes to that sustaining excellence or success, if you will?
Yeah, well, the culture sustains it. I mean, I'll be honest, I do less coaching now than I've ever done, and
Mm-hmm.
players lead more than they've ever led. And I think I've figured that out. That once I empower them and I've helped create this culture, it reproduces itself. Just the other day, our guys showed up for summer school. One of the guys was in there just telling the freshmen, "Hey, when we walk into that weight room, this is how we lift." And man, I
Wow.
loved hearing that.
Wow.
I didn't
Yeah.
have to say a thing.
That's huge.
Yeah, then we go have a great workout, and everybody goes, "Man, great job coaching." I'm like, I didn't do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was passed on from a senior last year, who passed it on from a senior before. And when that begins to reproduce itself, you begin to see how powerful culture is, and you begin to see that over time it can sustain success. Because as you said, it's easy to get there, very difficult to stay there.
I would think there's a number of things that maybe get in the way of that, but one thing when I talk to people is that balance in their lives. I know when I had kids, everything changed. I mean, as a coach, I was great when I just had to be coach and husband. When I added father in there, it was tough to balance all those out. And I think I've done a better job of that up to this point. But I'd love to hear your input, especially now, knowing that 16 months ago you had twins, and instead of 4 kids, you're up to 6 kids. So this work-life balance, is there a myth, or is there certain practices that you apply in your life that help all those roles out? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this, Greg. When you're at work, maybe you want to be at home. When you're at home, you want to be on your phone. What are some things that you do that allow you to have success, being in the moment or in that role?
Yeah. Well, you described a great tension that I think all of us leaders face. And probably a guy that I highly respect, somewhat of a mentor, he's a very successful business guy, once told me that there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
We don't balance those things. We prioritize those things. And I've just made a decision that I was going to prioritize my family. And it's not hard to make that decision, because I love my kids. I love my wife, and they're always going to be first. And it goes back to some of those kingdom principles that if you want to be first find a way to be third. Jesus was always flipping that. People would come to him and say, "Hey, in our world, I want to be the greatest." And he'd say, "Well, if you want to be the greatest, you actually have to start serving." So he would flip the idea, or you could say he'd turn it right side up. Well, it's the same thing with family life. And I'm in a season that's pretty crazy right now, as you and I were talking beforehand, with 6 kids, just had twins.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing far less. So in some senses, I'm relying upon my staff quite a bit, but in some senses, I'm trusting God for things that I just can't do. That isn't, I don't have any responsibility, but I would say my prayer life's increased more than anything. I spend a lot more time praying about recruiting right now, that I can become more efficient, that I can spend my time with my family. And God's brought us some amazing players. I mean, we had the National Player of the Year this year as a junior. We continue to get some pretty elite transfers from the Big 12, from the Big 10. And it's not because I'm out there shaking every bush, making every
right.
I'm doing my job, but at the same time, I'm trusting God for this program in new ways, in scary ways at times, but he continues to be faithful.
Well, and I got to think that, prayer is a daily habit. What are some other daily habits? When I talk to these leaders, high achieving people, I guess the older I get, Greg, the more I appreciate habits than I do goals. Goals eventually run out. You know, I want to lose 15 pounds. Once I lose it, I've lost it. Now what? Or even if I didn't get it, it's almost like, well, I failed. But if I have a habit of eating better every single day, that's going to make more of an impact on me, once again, sustaining over time. So you mentioned prayer. Are there other daily habits that you have in your life that you just consistently do over and over again?
You know, my mentor that I had years ago, he had a saying, "No Bible, no breakfast." And it was the idea, you know, every man loves to feed himself. We love food. He said, "I don't eat until I've first have opened up my Bible." And it's just a reminder to me that I want to prioritize my day that way. And I've also begun to be, before I go to bed, the last thing I want my eyes to see are God's word. Because it's easy to scroll through that phone right before you go to bed. What you're doing
Mm,
is training your brain to think like the world. It often induces a lot of anxiety. You know, oh, this school signed this school right before this
yep.
school signed this kid right before I go to bed. That's not what I need to see
No,
before I go to
no.
bed. I need to see God's word. And so the bookends of my day, the last thing I see, the first thing I see, if it's God's word, I feel like it really frames my heart and my mind for what is ahead of me that day.
So would you say, I mean, obviously, how do you grow personally? I mean, obviously it's through this, but are there other things you're doing? You're a reader, you know, you talked a little bit, you and I, about, you know, the classes that you're taking now. Like, what are some ways that you grow personally if people are out there looking at maybe some suggestions or things that they can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, so I'm in seminary right now, which is a busy time of life, but I'm taking seminary to help me become a better coach, and it's allowing me to lead better. But it's the people I'm surrounded with. I'm telling you, if I look at the different phases of my life, when I was 20, there were a couple key men in my life that were pursuing the same things as I was. There's a community. Then I became 30, and I found a different group of men. Now that I'm just turned 40, I feel like I've got a really select group of guys that help me grow. And I wouldn't want to live life any other way. I mean, I wouldn't want to live it in isolation. I want to live it with other men. I've had a couple small groups with some high school coaches, and it's been a blast in the middle of season to say, hey, this is going to be our focus. We're going to get in the word. We're going to memorize it. We're going to talk about it. It's a welcome distraction, because I think if left alone, I can go 100% in on basketball and
Yep.
just drive myself crazy. And then I
Right.
find myself not enjoying it. And then life's too short not to love what you do and enjoy it. So, man, I would say what I see a lot is in coaching is isolation. Find a group of guys that you want to grow with, pursue that growth, and you'll enjoy what you're doing so much better.
Well, I echo that, Greg. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, I was in a radical mentoring group with five other guys. One I knew, the other four I didn't really know. And man, me and those five guys today are as tight as all get out. And it's just nice to be in a group that I can expose myself, you know,
Mm.
talk about my weaknesses, and nobody judges me. You know, they're there to pray for me. They're there to lift me up. They're there to build me up. And even better is I get to do that with them now, you know, and that's just a great thing. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Well, hey, we're going to do somewhat of a rapid fire to finish. We got to take longer on these. We call this 3-pointers. So I'm not a passing point guard, but I know you're a shooter, so I'm going to dish you here and let you knock them down. Number one, if people could learn one thing from this talk, if they could just grab hold of one thing, what would it be?
To pursue the unthird life. It's not just the right way to live. I really think it's the good way to live. It's a really fun, laughter-filled, exciting, adventurous lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. Number two, if you could step into my shoes, what would have you asked Greg today that I did not ask?
Oh man, what do you like to do outside of basketball? You know, I'm a big hunter and fisherman, so I love to get outdoors. I got to. Sometimes I just got to get away and clear the air, and for me, that's it.
Well, I didn't tell you, but Jay Peters was actually in the league I coach. I kind of became close with him. So I know you do some of those things with the fathers event. So that's pretty cool. And lastly, number three, good stuff is the name of this. Just something I've always said. And I think there's a lot of good stuff in here today. But what's something that you can give us in closing? Anything that you feel is appropriate? Any good stuff, if you will?
Well, we didn't get into it, but if you see my hashtag little Etsy thing I got back there is a hashtag fearless, and we believe here that greatness favors the fearless. If you look throughout history, anytime anybody's done anything of noble greatness, it's been about fear being eliminated from the equation.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you on those, Greg. And I guess in closing, what are some ways people can stay in contact? I know maybe you're not on social media personally, But the program or the podcast, what are some ways that they can find those?
Yeah, I'll give you two ways. One would be the podcast. We have a podcast simply to tell the story of this journey each and every year. And it's really told from the perspective of our players. You can go to the podcast store and search IWU Hoops or I Am Third podcast. And then the other one would be our website. We created solely to talk about culture and ministry. It's called iwhoops.net.
Yeah, and I've been on both. I've listened to a couple of those. They're great. So, man, this was great, Greg. I love catching up here today. I have a ton of respect for what you've done, but more importantly, how you've done it. And major kudos here to this I Am Third concept. It resonates, but I have an unbelievable deal of admiration for you, for living that out, not only in your program, but in your life. I think a lot of people have these slogans and they put them up on the wall, but there's no secret that you're living that out every day and you're having a massive impact on a lot of people. So thanks for that. And, thanks for taking the time to do this today. This is going to be very beneficial for people.
It was a lot of fun, Kevin. It's great catching up. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, hey, once again, a ton in here today. I mean, a ton that I know I'm going to go back and listen to and reflect on and use myself personally. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Look forward to hearing from you. Reach out when you get a chance. And until next time, good stuff.